Okay, so if you were an American and you came into my bar and you were only here for one night and I had to give you a little bit of a taste about what the local tap house is all about and what the Australian craft beer scene was all about, I'd give you this particular tasting paddle. Now let me first just preface it by saying that this is what we've got on tap currently. We've obviously go through a lot of different beers, so if you came in tomorrow, the choice might be different, and if you came in a week's time, it might be different again. So I've picked a range of beers to a few different styles. You'll notice a few of them are a little bit darker, a couple of them are a little bit lighter. But I figure that you guys watching this, you're probably already into beer, so I'm going to go straight into the deep end and we're just going to go for it. So the first beer that I've chosen is called Mr. Mistopheles, and it's by a little brewery, very small brewery called Moondog. Moondog is three young blokes, two brothers and their friend, that started up a brewery literally 18 months ago, and they are making some fantastic beer. They're making beer that's really sort of outside the square, very much like Americans do, in fact. They're using, in this particular beer, Brettanomyces, which is a type of yeast that gives a lot of funky, sour flavours. And they made this beer especially for a festival that we held earlier on this year in May. Not a lot on the nose, and you can see that it doesn't have a lot of head there, but when you taste it, it's really got that sour side of the mouth kind of feeling. It's a kind of beer that polarizes a lot of people. Not everybody's going to love it. A lot of people in Australia are still just finding out about sours. Most brewers at the cutting edge agree that if you can, having a sour or creating a sour is really the next big thing. So this next beer is from Lord Nelson. It's an English brown ale, and Lord Nelson Brewery is actually, it's actually a brew pub. It's a small brew pub in the Rocks in Sydney, and the Rocks is a historical part of Sydney, and the Lord Nelson pub is probably the oldest pub in Australia, in fact, and they're making some fantastic beer. Very, very small, very hard to get any of their beer. Obviously, they really mainly just make enough for themselves and very, very few other people. They made this beer for our festival, and it's an English-style brown ale. It's got some toffee characters. It's very lightly bitter, doesn't have a lot of bitterness at all. A bit biscuity and bready. You'll notice it's not as dark as a typical brown ale, certainly not an American brown ale. Yeah, English brown ales are definitely a lot less hoppy than their American cousins. Fantastic beer, really sessionable, and made by a fantastic little brewery in Sydney that most people would never have heard of. So this next beer is called the Double Day of the Dead. It's by a little brewery called the Garage Project. This one is actually from New Zealand, and these guys are making some fantastic beer. It's across the Tasman. And this particular beer has hints of chili. It's got some really sort of rich chocolatey flavours, but you'll be surprised looking at it. It's not actually an ale, it's a lager, it's a bock. It's a really dark, strong bock. It comes in at about 8%, and it's a fantastic, tasty, chocolatey beer. Again, not massively hopped, very much a malt-driven flavour profile, but it's got that little hint of chili just to give it a little bit of a zing and a kick. And I could probably sit on on this one all night and love it. This next beer is called Prescription 12, and it's by Doctor's Orders Brewing. Doctor's Orders is a small little brewery from New South Wales, which is in Sydney is in New South Wales. And the guy that brews at Doc is what I would call a gypsy brewer. He brews at a few different breweries. Usually very small batch. He pretty much pre-sells the entire batch because there's a lot of demand for it. This particular one is a black IPA. Black IPAs are a little bit of a trend at the moment. In Australia, there's a few black IPAs emerging. This particular one has got a really great hop character. It's really well balanced, so the hops really are in great balance with the malt. It's got some of that sort of slightly smoky character. It's got a little bit of dark fruit character. The hop itself is quite pronounced and pretty bitter. Fantastic beer. Really big at for you guys maybe not so big, 7.6%. It's not exactly a a walk in the park, but it's not exactly as big as they get, but a really decent size 7.6% beer. Fantastic. This next beer is called The Wild Thing. It's by Murray's. Murray's is a brewery in Port Stephens, which is on the coast of New South Wales. It's a beautiful town that's right on the beach, on the coast. And the head brewer there, a bloke called Sean Sherlock, is a fantastic brewer. He generally brews using Belgian yeasts. He uses a lot of New Zealand hops and Australian malts. This is an imperial stout, a big imperial stout. It's, as you would expect, it's got some massive chocolate, coffee, roasted characters, almost a little bit of that banana. Big mouth feel, feels like you're drinking syrup. Perfect for winter. We're just coming out of winter here in Australia, and you can almost chew on this. Imperial stouts are probably my favourite style of beer, and these guys pretty much do it as good as it gets in Australia. This is a big, delicious but challenging imperial stout. Enjoy.